Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Song of Solomon study. We are in chapter 3 today, and we are taking a look at our PDF outline, which you can download on our website for free if you would like it. Getting into chapter 3, our first two sections for today are going to be pretty much the same. So we talked about our author. Solomon is the author, and we're also taking the view that he's the young man who's portrayed, the groom in this chapter who's portrayed in the book. We have our main characters, who first the young man, or Solomon, the young woman, who is his bride, his lover, and also the daughters of Jerusalem, who are going to be a little bit more relevant at the end of this chapter than they have been in the first two chapters. We do have three terms that we want to define today. The first one is myrrh. We saw this one before. It's a resin extracted from a plant used in perfume. Now, frankincense is our second one, and it's pretty much the same definition, an aromatic gum resin from the boswellia tree that's been used in perfumes for centuries. So these are used to beautify, to make things smell good, namely here the entourage of Solomon, I think specifically his bride, as she prepares for this wedding. And then we have this term litter. Now, this is not the same thing that you put in your cat's litter box. This is something different. Verse 7, this was a form of luxury transport. It was either a chair or a bed that was suspended on poles. Servants lifted the poles and carried the reclining transportee to their final destination. I guarantee you've seen this in some kind of a movie or a book or something like that. Basically, it was the way that they carried around the king so that he didn't have to walk. This chapter only has 11 verses, and we're going to cover the first 5 in section number 1, the young woman's daydream. So the young woman is still the speaker as we pick up here in chapter 3, and she begins by describing what appears to be a dream or a daydream that she had about her beloved, this young man. She was in bed one night longing for her lover, but he wasn't there. And so her affection stirred her up so much that she got up out of bed and she went out into the city in the middle of the night to look for him and try to find him. She went through the streets and through the squares, and she eventually found him, and she held on to him, and she wouldn't let him go. She wanted to bring him home with her to her mother's house, quote, into the chamber of her who conceived me. So into her mother's chamber. Now, what does she mean by this? This sounds really weird to modern ears, right? It seems like it's a desire for intimacy, maybe even to consummate their relationship. And where do we get that from? Well, some of it's from what we know about ancient wedding customs, but also there's a verse in Genesis chapter 24 that sounds real similar to this. When Isaac gets his new wife, Rebekah, he takes her into his mother's tent and seems to consummate the marriage there. So that may be kind of what she's looking forward to, longing for in this daydream. But you notice that she wants to do it in an honorable way. To bring him back to her mother's house. This is something that's all kind of above board and according to the customs and according also to the religious laws. We're going to come back to that in our application, so keep that in mind. But now we're going to go to section number 2, which is verses 6 through 11, the grand arrival for the wedding. And I do want to mention here as we bring up this wedding that it seems like not everything in Song of Solomon is written in chronological order. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, right? Because it's poetry. So don't think that, everything before this event, this what appears to be a wedding procession, not everything before this is pre-wedding and everything after it is post-wedding. It doesn't seem to be written that way. It just kind of seems that certain ideas and affections and emotions are expressed throughout the book, and they're not always in chronological order. So I think that's helpful in interpreting. You don't have to try to force everything that you read into that kind of chronological timeline, and I think that's it makes it a little bit easier to interpret. Okay, so this second section is a topic of a little bit of debate, interpretive debate. Some think that it describes the arrival of Solomon to Jerusalem for his wedding. Other people believe, based on the way that a verb is conjugated and the gender of that verb in Hebrew, that it's not actually Solomon who is arriving in this great procession, but it's actually Solomon's guards bringing his young woman into the city for the marriage ceremony. And it's also possible that they could both be arriving in this great wedding procession. So Just keep that in mind. There is some debate when you read commentators on this. It's also not 100% clear who the speakers are who actually give us the words of this portion of the text, but it seems likely that it's the daughters of Jerusalem who are the ones who are describing the royal entourage. Now, what is clear is that there was a royal procession of some great grandeur approaching the city, and it could be seen for some distance, quote, like columns of smoke perfumed with myrrh and frankincense. So the daughters of Jerusalem recognize that it is the litter of Solomon, and it's surrounded by 60 mighty men who are protecting the special wedding guests who are part of this procession. Solomon's carriage is described as part of this procession, and its equal probably didn't exist on earth during those days. It was made from the cedars of Lebanon with silver posts, a gold back, and purple seats. Would have been quite something to see in those days. As the entourage approaches, the daughters of Jerusalem encourage one another to go out and to admire Solomon, and specifically the crown that he is wearing on his head, that his mother has given him for his wedding day. And this crown may not be a reference to the royal crown that marked him as the king of Israel and Judah, but rather a crown that was special to his wedding day. In some ancient cultures, the bride and groom were given a nuptial crown, which they wore on the special day of the wedding because they are the kings and the queens of the day. That is one of the tip-offs that what we're seeing here is Solomon and this young woman being prepared to finally get married. Okay, so now for our application. What we daydream about matters, and the way we daydream matters. I think it's noteworthy that the young woman, when she has this daydream in the beginning of the chapter about finding her lover in the city and longing for him, it doesn't end with some kind of secret sexual rendezvous. It ends with fulfilling intimacy in her mother's house, in the culturally and religiously appropriate place for that kind of action. One thing that's clear from Jesus' teaching is that he cares not just about our outward actions, but also about what goes on in our heads. Our thoughts must be godly because our thoughts can be sinful, and the body acts as it's trained by the mind and by the heart. Now, specific to the subject of intimacy, which is so relevant in the Song of Solomon, we aren't free to daydream about fulfilling intimacy and finding that satisfaction in any way that we want. Now, forgive me if this question is crude. I don't mean it to be that way, but can you really imagine Jesus sitting down during his ministry and having his mind drift off into some kind of illicit sexual fantasy? No, right? We can't imagine that. We don't think of Jesus thinking like that. So why do we sometimes think that our internal thoughts don't really matter that much and don't matter in our goal of being like him? Sanctification towards Christ's likeness means guarding our minds from the devil's assaults on our thoughts. We want our thoughts to be trained to godliness, and that requires pushing out daydreams that don't fit his boundaries for sexual satisfaction. This is going to be an application that is relevant both to men and to women. So if you're not doing this at all, if you're not guarding your thoughts and your heart, I'd encourage you to start doing it. If you are, and you're tired, and you're sick of fighting this every day, it's an exhausting battle. I know I fight it along with you, and I just want to encourage you to keep going because it is a noble fight that God has called us to, and no doubt God and his Spirit will empower us and help us to do it as we fight every single day.